Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, Dr. Dave.
Doctor.
Yeah, we got to get that out before we
Yeah,
get going.
yeah. So we'd like to welcome all of our viewers and listeners back to another episode. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, welcome to our your first episode. We hope you enjoy it. For those that are returning, thank you for returning. And just a little quick plug: we do have our new website up. It has a lot of great content on there. You can view view all of our old previous episodes. I shouldn't say old; they're not old; they're previous episodes, and there's some other great stuff on there. So the link below, click on it, and enjoy the website. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started for today. And in our usual fashion, one of us introduces and then quickly does the hot potato and tosses it to someone else and lets them enjoy the heat for a few minutes. So a lot of puns there. And so today's topic is follow through. So follow through. Joe, when you think of
Okay.
follow through, what do you think about? Hmm.
Well, what immediately comes to mind is um are you completing what you set out or started? So, for instance, in my case, I was a huge abuser of this follow through idea. I was not very good at follow through when it came to my education the first four times,
Wow.
right? And I've said this before on a podcast, but it wasn't until that fifth time that it finally stuck, that it
Mhm.
finally I did follow through. And again, amazing what can happen when we follow through. And
Mhm.
and so initially it was just to finish that associate's degree, and 9 years later, two associates, a bachelor's, an MBA, and a doctorate. But again, like I said at the very beginning, that was not the case,
Mhm.
and I again count four times that it took me, and then there was a progression in how I was able to follow through. So the very first time I started or expected to attend class was I enrolled in the class. Before the class even started, I went back and bowed out of the class. So I
Mhm.
went back and got my money back. So I never even attended one day of class.
Mhm.
The second time, I actually started going. I went for a week and never returned
Well, at least you're
back to
progressing
the
in a
class.
positive direction.
And that's why I say I was progressing. The third time, I actually went several weeks and then never returned. Then the fourth time, I actually went to school for a full semester.
Mhm.
So you're right. I did progress in the positive direction. So up to that point, I had finished one class in one semester.
Mhm.
And not to say that next semester, this was probably 15 years later, that I went back and finally finished that whole process. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I refer to or what I think of when I think of follow through, just having that ability to complete what you start.
Mhm.
And so I like that as far as education. Other things I was able to follow through. I was able to, for another example, so I've been an aircraft mechanic. I did actually get an A&P license, which is that, licensing by the FAA that says you're equipped or have the skills to work on the airframe and power plant of an aircraft, right? And
Mhm.
so that was a long process that I was able to follow through, complete it to the end, and walked away with the license. Not to say that everything I've done or attempted to do, I wasn't able to follow through, but that is one example where I did follow through. So, even look like you're going to say
No, no,
something.
go ahead. I
I,
always
I
look
was
like I'm
just,
going to say something.
so I will say now though that I have experience, completion and follow through with my education, then it's made it a lot easier to complete what I started. I got into that rhythm and expectation that I was going to complete whatever I started, and so now I have a much better track record at starting and completing things, as opposed to what I did in previous like attempts going back to school. So that's my example of follow through. And I'll before I go any further, I'll let you jump in there just in case you
Yeah.
had anything
So
to
when
get
I
us
think of
going.
follow through, I immediately go to sports in my head.
Yeah,
And I'm not an athlete by any stretch, or you can stretch your imagination as far as you want, and I'll never be an athlete. But I think of swinging a golf club, and they always say you have to follow through. When you take a shot in basketball, you got to follow through with the shot, and throwing a
yeah,
football, follow through, kicking a soccer ball, follow through. And so when I hear follow through, that's what I think of is not stopping short and choking, or you know just not be able to make the shot. It's like I envision, taking a swing with a golf club, and the ball just goes dip 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 dip, dip just dribble. It goes like 5 feet.
right,
Or that bunt in softball, you're gonna bunt it halfway to the pitcher, and it drops on home plate. Or
right,
that big old 3-point shot, and it goes up and then goes straight down in front of you. That's me.
right,
So when I think of follow through, I kind of think about that. And why is that significant? Because if you don't follow through, the shot isn't going to make your shot isn't going to go anywhere. You have to complete the process of whatever it is you're taking that shot at. You know, you mentioned school. I remember in my early days in the military, I think a lot of us, when we were adapting to the military environment, there were some challenges that we faced, and I faced
right,
my share of challenges. And it wasn't until I followed through with some of my professional development activities that things started to click. And it's like I would start something and I wouldn't finish it, or I'd, not that I was habitually late, but it's like I would show up to work on time, and then one day I'd be 5 minutes late, and then I get in trouble. It's like
right,
just follow the process, follow through, and then you don't have to worry about those hiccups coming, and falling short. So some of the examples I like to use are, again, school. We've talked about that a lot, but just my career trajectory in general. I did my time in the military, and then I switched gears and started down the corporate path after I got out of the military. And
right,
following through with that, it's a big deal. You can't just send one application into one company for one job, and then go, oh, I didn't get it. That's it. It's over with. I'm never going to get a job in accounting, or whatever. Sometimes you have to apply multiple times. Sometimes you have to apply multiple times to the same company or different companies. So that's part of that follow through, opening up the opportunities as you're following through with the process for your goals. And on the same, pulling that thread a little bit more, you can be in the same company and have to apply multiple times within the same
right,
company to
right.
advance, or to lateral, or to move down, up, backwards, or whatever, to finally get where you want. Like we've talked before, it's, a career path is not this nice straight line. Looks like it looks like you took a 1,000-piece puzzle, jumbled it up, and threw it on there, and you just started drawing a line through it. That's what it looks
Right.
like. There's a lot of different possibilities and directions that can go.
Well, Dave, I want to go back to kind of the sports analogy you did, because again, being a coach for my two sons in basketball, follow through is definitely important when you're teaching them how to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that we did talk about a lot, was that follow through with the kids, and so the kids that were successful were the ones that had to follow through it and follow the process. And you touched on that, but that's what I was going to kind of bring up, the idea that even though we you want to do the follow through with the swing or the throw or whatever you're doing, but I think what's important about that is understanding the process,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
the that's what I used to see with the kids. They'd go out there and, immediately start trying to shoot from the 3 point line and shooting these long shots. And I was like, uh, you know, the chances of you making that are going to be far greater than going in, moving in closer, and practicing on your stroke, your
Mhm.
process, the
Mhm.
fundamentals, and then as you get stronger, as you maximize that process, then you can start to step back and it'll make more sense. But I think that's important as well as understanding the process, whatever that follow through is. You said it, even in the trying to get a job, interviews, those types of things. You apply for a job and you expect just to get the job. But are you, like you said, are you doing a follow through? Are you reaching back out and saying, "Hey, thanks for that interview," or
Mhm.
"Thanks for allowing me to do that"? So are you doing the other things that goes along with that? And I'll give you
Yeah.
an example.
Yeah.
So when I was so I was a state command chief in the military for Missouri Air National Guard, but I didn't get it the first time I applied. And so a lot of people don't know that. The first time I applied, um, when the general called me and said, "Hey, thanks for your interview," I took that as an opportunity to ask him, "What can I do better, or how
Mm.
can I improve, or put myself in a position so that next time this comes around, I would be a better candidate?" And so he said, "Hey, you needed this certain skill. You need to be able to do this and do that." And while he was, telling me all these things, I was writing these things down. And so 3 years later, this the same role came up. I applied again, and then as soon as I went in for the interview with the general, we sat down and he looked at my resume, and he was just blown away by the things that he had suggested and that I'd done. And
Mhm.
so it was at that point he was just again just amazed at, I gave you some direction, you
Mhm.
followed through with it, and now I can't deny you, this position is yours.
Right.
And so that was the difference again this time. Then the first time, yeah, it was kind of painful because I thought, oh yeah, I got this locked up, sewed up, no problem. At that time I had my doctorate degree, so I thought I was a shoe in.
Mm.
But the reality, stuck that I didn't have certain things that the job required.
Yeah.
And so he was gracious enough to let me know what those were. And then for my part, to do that follow through was to go and get as many of those things that I could. And I was successful at it. So that's
That is a great example because instead of stopping short and instead of saying, "Well, I tried, I didn't get it," you did
right.
pay attention and take
Yep.
notes and basically create a checklist. And to your point,
Absolutely.
you went through that checklist, that follow through, and
Yep.
said, "Oh, I guess I do need some development. I do need to
Exactly.
work on a few things." And you went through and you ticked off each one of those things. That's what we're
Yep.
talking about when we talk about follow through. It's
Yep.
those fundamentals, like when you swing that bat, are you stopping short? When you go to pass the ball, do you stop short and it drops in front of you? What are those fundamentals of that follow through? It could be
Right.
something as
Yep.
simple as sending a thank you note for an interview, or asking, "Hey, what would have made me a better candidate?" Or um, just learning different skill sets that'll benefit you in your career trajectory to
Right.
help you reach those goals. If you want to be a surgeon, most times you need to have a medical doctorate degree. And if you stop short and you don't follow through and get that medical doctorate degree, there's a probably a pretty good probability. I just said probable probability
Right.
that you may not become that surgeon.
Right.
So understanding what it takes, what the requirements are, is a big part of that follow through. You can't say, "Well, I tried once and I didn't get it." Did you seek feedback? Did
and
you
and,
did you
and
communicate with people? Did you get advice? And if the answers are no, then you didn't follow through with what you really
absolutely.
wanted.
And that's what I was trying to, and you said touched on a couple of times, again, understanding the process, the fundamentals of what it takes to get to that next level, or to complete whatever that thing is. And that's why I was referring to with the kids, learning the proper technique on how to shoot, why the
Hmm.
follow through is important, understanding all those things. And that will help you again achieve where you're trying to go. And that's why I always, whenever I talk to someone that's asking for advice, especially when it comes to promotions and new jobs and things like that, I'll always let them know that if you don't get it the first time, that's okay. But one thing that's important is that follow up, that
Yeah,
going back
understand
to that
why you did
that
not receive it.
interview
Yeah.
exactly, and asking that panel or whoever that interviewer was, and ask them, how can I improve? What do I
Hmm.
need to be more competitive? What things are you looking for? Especially if you're going to try for that same job, then it's important for you to understand that. But at the same token, if you're in an organization and you're trying to move to a different department or
Hmm.
a part of the same organization but different department, it's also important to go and find out what it's going to take to get there, and
Hmm.
understanding the process, understanding the basics of what it takes, so that at least you do have the skills that are going to make you immediately eligible for that position. And you know even though I was successful with what was provided to me, and I paid attention, like Dave said, I took the notes, I checked all the boxes. There still I could have come up against other people that were still even more qualified than me. So
Hmm.
again, fortunate I was able to get to that level. But the point I'm trying to make is that even if I would have come back the second time and still didn't make it, I still would have followed through as prescribed.
Hmm.
Um, but then again, after if that would have been the case that I didn't get it again, I may have had that same conversation. Okay, so what can I do next time?
Right. Right.
So it's about, again, making sure you're doing the things you need to do to get you there. Now, if I
Yeah.
didn't get it, I did all those things, and there was no legitimate reason why I wasn't selected, then that's a different story. But
Right.
as long as you're checking the boxes, these are the things you said that I need to work on or do, and I've completed that, then you've done your part as far as the follow through.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
Dave touched on that too. If you partially swung or stopped short, then yeah, you did some of the things you needed to, but you
Right.
didn't do the complete follow through. And
Right.
that's the message we're trying to relay here, is that
Yeah.
you got to follow the entire process.
Yeah. It's kind of like learning how to drive and then not getting your license.
Right,
Or maybe from a hobby perspective, or maybe it's your profession as a painter, not letting the paint dry before you apply the second and third coats.
right, yep,
It's you have to, the process is part of the follow through, or the follow through is part of the process. And sometimes there is time that needs to pass, minimum of 2 hours before you put on the next coat of paint or
right,
something like that. If you're going to build a fence, what does that look like? Are you just going to put boards up, or are you going to plant them in the ground? I mean, you could follow through, you could put it up, but it may
right,
fall down. So are you anchoring it? So we can think about that as, are we anchoring our careers or our personal development, our professional development the way we need to, so it can support the follow through.
right,
So when that wind comes, it's not going to blow the fence down. Or yeah, I'll stop there. We could do analogies all day long. So when you think about it, what is the process that you need to understand so that you know how to follow through, or what that follow through looks like. And it may be, in the case of the military, you have to have a certain amount of time within that position before you can advance.
right,
And that's
yep,
part of that follow through. If you don't do the time, then you're not going to be able to advance. What are the
right,
requirements? And then, the other sides of this goes back to the career thing. The interviews, like we said, are you asking what can you do better? Are you applying to multiple positions at multiple companies that you'd like to work at? Are you networking? Is it just a, hey Joe, I'd like a referral, and Joe's like, who the heck is Dave? That's
right,
that's not a follow through. So building those relationships and reciprocating those relationships is part of the follow through process, and networking and in communication. We can have a conversation, and if one person just listens and doesn't provide any feedback, what's the follow through? what
Right.
is actually transpiring? Is it communication or is it just information that's being conveyed? So we talk a lot about these different topics that are related, and and many of them follow through as a big component of it. I'll go
Absolutely.
to our podcast. We started this podcast a few years back, and before we did that, for a few years, we were like, we need to start a podcast. We should do a podcast. What was the follow through? We spent 2 years talking about having a podcast. The follow through was flip the switch and start a podcast.
Right.
You
Yep.
know, the we couldn't ask ourselves, why is the podcast working? Because you haven't started a podcast.
Right. Yep.
What's the
Yep.
follow through to having a podcast? Improvement, understanding what's working, what's not working, understanding the flow. What can we do to make things better? What topics can we introduce?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, we did all the preparation to get us to the podcast, but like you said, we didn't do the most important thing, and that was to flip the switch and actually do the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we were so afraid of failure, what this was going to look like, and so we failed to do the follow through. We failed to
Yeah.
do again the most important thing, and that was actually to start the podcast.
Yeah.
So even though we had all our ducks in a row, everything was aligned, we had everything we needed, we still didn't have the complete follow through. We did not
Mm-hmm.
complete the process. And
Yeah.
so that's an example of having everything in place, the tools that we had the commitment to a degree, but
Mm-hmm.
again, we didn't have that follow through as that final stage of that process. So that's also important and that's kind of where I was even with when I applied for that job and I had the credentials, I thought, and I had all these things, but I still wasn't able to get over the hump because I didn't have all the things I needed. But in our case with this podcast, we had everything we needed. We just had not done, like Dave said, flip the switch and just
Yeah.
did the podcast. So
So
that's the
go ahead.
other part of uh, you know the follow through is getting out of your head and actually applying those
Yes,
things you've
that's where I
learned.
was just going to go is
Yeah.
if you're not following through, what's preventing you from
Right.
following
Yep.
through? And that
Yep.
was the next question I was going to bring up. So if you're not following through, why are you not following through? Is it because
Right.
of your fear of failure? Is
Yep.
it time management? Is it confidence? What is preventing you from following through
Right.
that you can change, that you can impact? Some things we can't impact. If I want to go golfing, which, like I said, I don't golf. If I want to go golfing, I probably should not do it in the middle of a thunderstorm when there's
Right. Right.
tornadoes. That's
Yep.
not the time to follow through. So
Right.
is it timing, understanding what is preventing you from following through? Whether we can't, it's not something we can control. But there are certain things that we can control, and understanding why you're not following through or why you're stopping short is imperative to successfully following through.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to go back to the job thing. Is it because you're not applying to enough jobs? Is it because you're not applying to enough companies? Do you not have your network in place or the right network in place? On a professional side, do you have all the courses and certifications or training that you need or experience that you need? And if not, why not? What's stopping you from following through to getting to that end goal or that next goal or that next milestone? So this involves that critical self-reflection and being
I was just thinking that.
brutally,
Yeah.
brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
We can say, hey, we're doctors, we know everything, but that's not true. We
Right.
don't know everything. And that's the brutal honesty that we have to, that's that brutally honest conversation that we have to have with ourselves. You can think you're the best, and maybe you are, but you're falling short somewhere on that follow through. And that's why you're
Right.
not
Yep.
obtaining your goals or reaching your goals.
Yeah, I think that's a very important piece of it. Like you said, that's kind of how I felt when I applied for that job. And again, thinking, oh, I got this. There's
Mm-hmm.
nobody better than me. And it was that reality check that the general passed on that, yeah, you got great tools, but you don't have all the tools you need to be successful. And
Mm-hmm.
so that, again, it was a blow to
Mm-hmm.
my ego and to where I thought I was on my
Right.
progression. And so but I was willing to accept it. Okay, he's right. I don't have everything I need. And that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of because even when people would come up to me and say, well, you had more qualifications than this guy. And I would actually have to say, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
I know it appeared on paper, But after meeting him, after talking to him and understanding what he brought to the table, I understood that
there was
I
things
was
that
no
yeah, I was missing some
absolutely
things.
I that I was nowhere near where
Hmm.
he was as far as that progression ladder in his career. And so that's what helped me. Again, it was that critical self-reflection, that
Hmm.
evaluation of the whole process, and not just taking my side of it and thinking, oh, that was not correct or not fair. It was more, again, taking into account that, yeah, there were some things missing that I needed. And so
Hmm.
that's part of it. Yeah, sometimes we have to be brutally honest with ourselves, and really look at, okay, do I meet the qualifications? Did I do everything? And that was the other kind of path I wanted to go down a little bit is, am I doing everything I need to do? Or am I just,
Right.
throwing something out there saying, okay, I tried, that's it?
Yeah.
Or am I, again, going to following through the entire process before I say,
Right.
man, I did. And that's some of the, things I had to help my sons understand too when they were playing basketball and I was coaching them. They get frustrated and I'd say, well, did you follow the process? Did you do everything you can?
Hmm.
Then that's really all I can expect out of you. I can't
Hmm.
expect you to be a Superman or anything like that. I just, want you to make sure that you can check out the boxes saying, yes,
Yeah.
I did all of these things. I followed this process, and
Yeah.
I still came up short. So
Yeah.
that's
And
an important piece of
and
that.
and the other piece I wanted to bring in, which totally relates to what you're talking about, is understanding that experience does not equate educate or experience does not replace education, and education does not
Right.
replace
Absolutely.
experience. And
Yeah.
if you're missing a certification or a qualification or a certain number of years of experience or a type of experience, that's something you need to own up and say, and
Right.
determine, is that going to be part of your plan to follow through? Because if you're not willing to do those things, you can't expect the same results. You
Right.
know,
Yep.
you can't not do something. There's a double negative. You have to do the things that you need to do to get there. To your point, did you do everything that you possibly could to be successful before you said, "Hey,
Right.
I'm good. I'm done. I'm gonna change directions. I'm gonna pivot or whatever."
Right.
So, that's what we have to understand. And you and I talk about this a lot offline. Are we doing everything that we need to do or that we
Yep.
can do on whatever it is, whether it's a hobby, whether it's, personal, professional, career, whatever? Are we doing everything that we need to do to achieve those goals or to keep going down that path that we want to continue down?
Right. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
we've got a couple minutes left in the show. What closing thoughts do you have there, Joe?
I just want to encourage everybody. Again, I have a lot of examples of me not making it the first time, or
Mhm.
me failing, or not necessarily failing, but did it didn't or did not reach the level that I thought I was capable of, or so I had to go back, do soul search, and do some critical self reflection, some evaluation of the process to make sure I was following it, to make sure I was setting myself up for success and not
Yeah.
failure. But again, to being humble sometimes.
Yeah.
You touched on it. I didn't want to say anything at first, but you touched on the driving thing. I actually failed my first time too, the driving test the first time. So again, I'm an example of not making it through the first time always. I've had to
Mhm.
go back on several occasions on different things to get where I am today. But I think for me, the most important thing was that I tried to go to the furthest level I could, following the process, doing the things that people suggested and recommended. And so when I do walk away and say I'm done, it's because I tried to exhaust everything I could.
Mhm.
So I just encourage anybody that's out there in the audience that's considering walking away from something because they've tried once or twice. Like I said, it took me 5 times before I could finish my any type of education degree. So just hang in there, keep following the process. You may have to change it a little bit. It may not work exactly like it has for someone else, but that's still up to you to make sure you can walk away saying, yes, I did follow through completely. So I'll end with that.
That's some great feedback there, Joe. The only thing I'll add is don't let your confidence or overconfidence cloud your perspective on where you really are on that follow through process.
Right. Yeah.
Don't be overconfident and say, well, I've already done it when you really haven't.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the show. We'd like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. If you like what you heard or saw or listened or viewed, share, like, subscribe on our website. We've got, like I said in the beginning, we've got lots of great stuff coming, and yeah, lots of great things. And like and subscribe to the link below or above or to the sides, or all of them. We're just gonna have a border around it. So thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoyed the show. And until next time, keep on being your not so ordinary you.